What's going on everyone? I am Chirag and welcome to part 8 of tutorial series on API Gateway tutorial. In the previous tutorial, I have taken you through on how to define and pass query parameters via get method to the lambda function. And now in this tutorial, I'm going to cover the same but using lambda proxy integration, right? So as you can see on my screen, the path parameter, that is bucket within curly braces, and the get method, that is something that we have created in the previous tutorial, right? So ideally it's relatively simple to configure and pass the parameters to the lambda function while we are using lambda proxy integration. So when I say parameters, it's the path parameter and the query string parameter, right? So ideally we are going to delete this resource first, but before we do that, we can even convert this integration request to the proxy integration by navigating to integration request and check this checkbox saying use lambda proxies integration, and this will be converted into a proxy request, right? But since I don't want to create confusion here, and I think it's good to start from the first step, so that's the reason we are going to delete this resource and we are going to recreate this resource. So you might think that why can't we create another path parameter resource and use it, right? So the reason that we are not doing it because API gateway allows only single path parameter resource, right? So if I click on root and click on actions and say create resource, and if I try to create saying ID as a path parameter and say create resource, it will say a sibling bucket of this resource already has a variable path part, only one is allowed, right? So it threw an error. So that's the reason we are going to delete this and we are going to recreate one resource, right? So I'm just trying to cover everything from scratch so that no confusion occurs. So that's the reason I'm deleting this, and we will recreate it. So I will say delete resource, delete. Now again we are going to create a resource saying action create resource. Again I will define it as bucket as the path parameter and say create resource, and within that again select that and click on action create method, say get, click on the tick mark. Now within lambda function integration, we are going to check this, that is use lambda proxy integration, and we will define a lambda function. So here we are going to bind the same lambda function that we have created in the previous tutorial, that is access file s3 API, right? And say save. Okay. Now since we have proxy integration, if you look at integration response, it is being disabled. Within integration request, now we don't have option for mapping template or URL query string parameters and all that, right? Now once this is done, navigate to method request, click on URL query string parameters. So here we will define file as we have did it in the previous tutorial, right? It is required. Now we have a warning because we have to configure request validator. So click on this pencil mark, select validate query string parameters and headers, and save it. Now the warning mark has been gone, right? And that's it. We are not going to configure anything within integration request, right? So let's deploy this API. So say deploy API, select the version, say deploy. Now before we go ahead and invoke this API endpoint, let's navigate to lambda function, and we have to comment few lines over there. Now within lambda function, it's access file s3 API. Now here we will comment this bucket name, file name, and this print statement, and we will uncomment print event and say save. Now let's go ahead and invoke the API endpoints. So navigate to Postman. So here it is, the API endpoint URL followed by the path parameter, that is bucket name, followed by query string, that is file equal to content.pdf, and say send. Now it says hello from lambda. It means the call was successful. Let's go ahead to CloudWatch and have a look at the logs of the lambda function. So click on monitoring, view logs in CloudWatch. Now here we have the log, that is first one. Now as you can see, the event or the data that we are getting in the event is different from what we had received earlier in the previous tutorial while we had not configured the proxy integration, right? So as you can see over here, we have all the metadata and whatnot, right? So the value or the parameters that we are looking here is this one, that is query string parameters, that is file equal to or file colon content.pdf, and the path parameter that is over here, that is bucket and bucket name, right? So let's go back to lambda function, click on configuration, and let's try to fetch the path parameter and the query string parameter, right? So now in this case, it's not going to be at this location, that is event of params of path of bucket. So it will throw an error if we try to fetch from here, right? Instead, it's going to be an event of query string parameters. So let me copy and paste, that is query string parameters of this is for the file name. So file name equal to query string parameters of file, and for the bucket name that we are receiving within path parameters, it's going to be path parameters of bucket. So path parameters of bucket. Now we are going to save this, right? And we are going to print bucket name and file name. So let's go ahead and delete all the logs and reinvoke the API endpoint. So navigate to Postman, say send. Now let's go ahead and check the logs. So as you can see, we have the path parameter, that is bucket name, which is upload API tutorial, and the query string parameter, that is file equal to content.pdf. So that is something we are considering, or we are going to consider it as a file name or the key within the S3 bucket, right? So well, that's it for now. So this is how you can configure and pass query parameters to the lambda function using lambda proxy integration method, right? So well, in the next tutorial we will take a step further towards the scenario that I mentioned in the part 7 of this tutorial series. So in the next tutorial I will cover on how we can return file or binary data to the end client that the end client is requesting. So well, till that time, if you want me to do tutorial on any use case or service, then please leave them below and I will try my best to come up with the tutorial as soon as possible. And if you have any queries or comments, then again please leave them below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, and see you next time.